Leadership. One of the most important aspects of leadership is communication. And one of the most important aspects of communication is storytelling. That's why I'm so excited to mention the Stories with Traction course with you. In this course, you will learn how to be a great storyteller. I share concepts with you on how you can boost sales, enhance your internal communication and marketing, and create a vibrant company culture. If you're looking to build a story bank for your organization and utilize a framework to persuade more effectively, go check out the course in the show notes, the Stories with Traction course. Now, on to the podcast. Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. Great leadership is hard. Due to movies and social media, we're bombarded with messages that leadership is glamorous. But in reality, business leaders need to make hard decisions every single day. Though at times leadership can be rewarding, it can also be incredibly frustrating, tiring, and sometimes even lonely. That's what I want to focus on in this conversation. Today, I'm joined by Linda Goldstein. She is the founder and CEO of Linda Goldstein Consulting. She's the former mayor of Clayton, Missouri, and she is a coach and trusted advisor to CEOs, business leaders, and key executives. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, so thank you for spending time with us today. I want to unpack different elements of leadership. I feel like for whatever reason, there's this glitz and glamour forward-facing image, and then behind the scenes, there are decisions leaders need to make day in and day out that at times can be grueling. So I want to dive into your background, some of the experiences you've gone through in the public service environment, and then ultimately leading into business and everything you've done in the business world, as well as being a leader of leaders and coaching a lot of these executives. So I really want to start with that public service time. So when you were leading up to being mayor, is it something that you wanted to do for a while? Was there an aha moment where you wanted to get involved? How did that start?
I have two answers for you. A typical politician, right?
There you go.
That's
awesome.
right. When I had to be convinced to run for mayor. I had been an alderman for 8 years. I was going to be term limited out, and I was really not pressured, but encouraged. People wanted me to run. And I thought, oh, well, I'm running. I ran a commercial flooring contracting business. And so it was a small business, mid-sized $20 million business that I was responsible for day in and day out. And I was worried that I wouldn't have the time to devote to mayor. However, I know we're going to talk about some of the things that I did while I was in office. And those things I had been passionate about prior to ever even being in office. Like I would have hopefully found a way to work on them even without the public persona.
Sure. Okay. All right. So based on what you're doing in the business world, you saw, and how long were you working, leading this commercial flooring business prior to diving into public service?
I had been there a total, when I left to do my consulting business, which is what I have now, I had been in the business for over 20 years. Wow. It was actually my husband's family's company. And in the end, one thing led to another, and I ended up heading it up.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So was there like a specific need that you saw when you ran for mayor that you wanted to tackle right out of the gate?
I was very involved in environmental issues as an alderman, and I got a reputation for, getting things done in sustainability in our community. And actually, I was recognized nationally for some of the initiatives that I brought to Clayton. So I continued that. And then as mayor, I had even more opportunities to invest in that.
Sure. Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those environmental issues. Specifically, one of the stories that you mentioned to me. I just want to paint the scene for everyone. So what was happening at that time, and kind of dive into that. So can you talk about what was happening within restaurants within your area?
I can. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I can't say I ran for mayor to do, but it's something that I did, was I worked with the restaurants. I worked with the whole community to have smoke-free public spaces. And the reason that it was always, when I told you I had two answers earlier, I always had the passion for smoke-free air and to avoid passive smoking. And before some of your listeners think, oh my gosh, she's just a radical non-smoking person, I felt that anybody can smoke. You could smoke. I don't care. It's your right to smoke. But I care when it becomes a public hazard, when it
Sure.
affects public health. And that's I got very involved in the rights of the people who work in the restaurants and in the offices. And so that was a passion of mine, was public health and smoke-free air.
Sure.
And it's
No, that's great.
environmental too. Yeah.
And it's interesting to think today that you used to walk into a restaurant and were asked smoking or non-smoking. Like, it is just incredible today to think that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so to paint the scene, that was the case when you were doing this, and there had to have been other positive reasons for this, right? So maybe they didn't want to go into a restaurant. So maybe different restaurant owners were getting hurt. So what other factors played into this as well?
Well, you asked about an aha moment, and we, the elected officials of Clayton, were interested in. We have three major universities in this city, and we were not getting the people. The students would come in, they'd go to the university, and they'd go home or somewhere else. And our own, students and young people were going away to college and staying away. And when we started our informal data collection, asking people, why didn't you come back to St. Louis? And they said, among other things, because they didn't use the word barbaric, but I think they would have, if they were less polite. They said, it's ridiculous. You have smoking in restaurants.
Wow.
And nobody else where we've lived in the communities, other communities, allow that. And so it became not just a public health hazard, which certainly, we believed it was, but also an economic development.
Sure.
We wanted to attract and retain young talent. We have a lot of major companies in our city, and they needed the young talent. And we had everything. We had, to the degree we had, we're a walkable city. We have extensive bike paths. We have, we're fashion forward in terms of the environment and alternative energy and all of these programs that young people desire, or at that time were very important and new, cutting edge. But this smoking thing apparently was big, because we got that answer from a number of them saying,
sure,
I don't want to be in a place that allows smoking.
Sure. So just so people understand, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this thinking that's a no-brainer, right? Especially today where we are, it's a no-brainer. But paint the scene for us, because this was not an easy feat for you to do. I mean, there was a lot of decision makers behind the scenes. I'm sure there's many varying different ideas and opinions and all kinds of feedback you were getting. So under the pressure in the moment, what was going through your head when maybe some people were supporting you, but maybe they weren't being vocal of that support, so you weren't having as much muscle behind it? Maybe you were getting criticized. I can only imagine the emails and phone calls that you may have received in that moment. What was the focus for you?
So it was very interesting, and you alluded to backstories in business and in politics, because there's always, you read things in the paper and there's always just a whole other life behind the scene.
Sure.
Right. So the backstory was quite interesting because, yes, publicly we were really criticized, and just had a lot of restaurants. The restaurants primarily were the ones that didn't want the smoking ban, and so we had to deal with that. But we did this right. We took 8 months to go through this process, and the beginning of it was data collection. We did surveys. We knew that something like 76% of our citizens wanted Clayton to go smoke-free, even if we were an island in, a smoking area. Even if we were an island, 76% said do it. So that was good. Then we surveyed our businesses. We have a lot of business here. And again, the vast majority said smoke-free air. Yes, that would be great. Then we interviewed and surveyed our restaurants, and it was split down the middle. 49 wanted it or didn't want it, and 51 the other way. So we knew that was what was going to be a hurdle. We went into this saying that there's one thing, we have a draft ordinance. It's truly draft. We want to hear from you. We held, I think 3 public hearings, maybe 4. We truly wanted to listen, because just like in business, the more perspectives you have, the better decision you get. You don't want yes men around you. You really do want to hear others' opinions. So we worked with all of our constituents, and there were some serious concerns on behalf of the restaurants. And so we worked really hard with them to satisfy their needs. And then you talk about the emails. I got more emails and support, but people were afraid. They don't want to get involved in a controversy. So they were comfortable emailing, but didn't want to go, to the, heated public meetings. They didn't want to do that. So
when you were receiving all these emails, did you feel encouraged and supported, or were you frustrated that people were unwilling to vocalize this publicly?
Well, the emails I got from the restaurants, there was a restaurant association in Clayton, or it still is. And the head of it was vehemently, very vocal against this in no uncertain terms. And he brought in all the other restaurateurs who could make it, and they'd sit behind him and they'd just sit there and look. I got so many emails from them saying, don't you dare use my name. But I totally support what you do. I have to do this because I'm in the association, and, my fellow, they didn't know that each other supported the whole idea of smoke-free air. And, so it was gratifying. It was, kind of confirmed some of the things we were saying. And there's one email, I reference it in the chapter of the book that I wrote recently. It was from a man who said, I eat in Clayton restaurants, at least once a week, and I'm a smoker. And if you, and I light up after every meal, if you ban smoking in Clayton, and I thought, oh no, here we go. And he said, if you ban smoking in Clayton, I'm going to have to go outside to smoke, and I won't do that. But I smoke too much, and I really am trying to give it up. So I'll be back, and I'm really happy that you're doing this.
Well, that's a turnaround.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Just when I was prepared for the worst. Do you mind? I don't know how much you want me to talk, but it reminds me of another thing that happened that I was prepared for the worst and it turned out to be the best. Can I tell another story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one night, I worked full time running that business. And so one evening it's dark out and I'm heading to City Hall. And as I approach it, I see all of the media trucks, which is, with the satellites and the lights. And then I look and I see there's people with signs picketing in front of City Hall. And I thought, oh gosh, it's going to be such a late night. And oh my goodness, what's going on? So as I got closer to all this, I looked at the signs and people were going by and they were honking their horns and, all this. Oh, goodness. And so I looked and these were teenagers with Clayton High School T-shirts on. And they were saying that the signs that they were holding were honk if you want clean air. And so all this chaos that I thought it was chaos and I thought it was dissent was in fact in favor. And I was so happy because I had one of my efforts was to get young people involved in local government. And here they were, they showed up.
Sure.
So it was great.
Wow. That is great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And it also shows people too that so you, as you mentioned, you're working full time, running this business, plus you're doing this in addition. And I feel like a lot of people, especially around the country, for whatever reason, maybe it's West Wing or shows like that, that there's not as much of an understanding of what public service is in the local communities, especially when we're talking about a mayor. So I appreciate you painting that picture for us because there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of people that their hearts are in the right place. They want to bring about positive change and they have a lot going on. Right. So I feel like a lot of the shows and movies out there don't really do it justice as far as what's happening behind the scenes. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I do want to ask you though. So you get the residents on board. You mentioned 76% approve, overwhelming majority. You get a lot of the businesses on board, and then you have restaurants that are split. What tipped the scales in the direction of doing this? What was there different stories that people were sharing? Was it one specific thing? What was something that tipped the scales?
In the end, the answer to that, in the end, we worked very closely with the restaurants and other constituents, and we drafted a different ordinance that answered all their serious and legitimate concerns. It was, again, other perspectives. You make a better decision. And we hadn't thought of some of the things that they were bringing up. So, and then we promised the restaurants that we would devote, I can't remember how much money, but we had a nice size budget that we were going to devote to a public relations campaign to publicize Clayton's smoke-free restaurants.
Wow.
And then we did something to accelerate the time to have outdoor dining, getting the license for that, because we at that time hadn't you could still smoke in outdoor dining. That changed shortly after we put the ordinance into place, and that was by our residents asking for that. So the thing that really got it through was the process. It was a process that was very inclusive. We had no hidden agenda other than doing what was right for public health.
Sure.
That wasn't a hidden agenda. We said it.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate the aspect of collaboration, right? And clearly we need to do this in business, right? So just so everyone is clear, like a lot of this translates to business because as leaders, we're constantly having to collaborate. I appreciate what you said about you don't want yes men, right? You want individuals to play that devil's advocate, to kind of rough the idea up, to refine it. So talk about how this positioned you to help others lead.
So let me make sure I understand your question. Are you asking? Could you ask me again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So everything that you've gone through, and this is just one of, I'm sure, many stories
Mhm.
that you can mention regarding collaboration, but because of all of this regarding how to work with the residents, the businesses, the restaurants, the key
Mhm.
decision makers, and to figure out something that works, in addition to everything that you were doing with the business you were running in commercial flooring, how did
Mhm.
this position you to help other leaders lead to be better?
So I share my stories with a lot of other leaders, and I'm quick to say, I was always quick to say in my business position and as mayor, we we accomplished this, not me, and I gave credit because behind every really uh, important initiative and big decision and policy or whatever, there's got to be more people
Sure.
to really implement, to come up with the best solution, to implement it, and all that. So it really is about a team of people. And the perfect example in this smoking thing is that I got Clayton to be smoke free. My initial efforts, I went to the state of Missouri early on and sort of got laughed out of Jefferson City. And yeah, you can picture that. If you want, what? Smoke free? What do you mean? So anyway, that was that. I decided not to take too much time pursuing that. But then I went to the county and they were like, no way.
Wow.
And then I went to the city. But if I had gotten, as I did, I got Clayton to be smoke free, and we were all very happy. But meanwhile, I had been working with Lyda Cruson, who was an alderman at that time. She was the first woman mayor of the city of St. Louis.
Wow.
Anyway, she and I had collaborated on some other things. And she was able to get an ordinance in place in the city that if the county went smoke free, the city would go smoke free. So I was also working with the county and a woman named Barbara Frazier, who is a county councilwoman. And we were able to get the issue on the ballot for the county. And that passed again with overwhelming majority of county residents wanting to go smoke free. So after Clayton started this, the county went smoke free and the city went smoke free. And so it's the power of a collaboration. It really is. It's that three of us did this. If it hadn't been for the other two women, Clayton would have been quite happy as a smoke free island, but it would not have had the impact that the efforts of three people made.
Yeah, so everything you just mentioned just screams strategy to me, right? So you really figured out the strategy behind it, where if it wasn't going to work in the city, you take it to the county, put it on the ballot, let the residents decide. That's just brilliant strategy. So and that's what we need to do in business all the time. If something's not working, what strategy? Not only thinking outside the box, but doing outside the box, right? And you absolutely
Right.
did outside the box. I appreciate you mentioning that. I do want to talk a little bit about what you were doing leading this commercial flooring business, something in particular that I'm curious about. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would guess that industry is a male dominated industry. So just a
Yes,
hunch.
it
It's
is.
just a hunch. So I have a daughter that is just unbelievably creative. I don't know what she's going to do in the future, but she just unbelievably creative, incredible connector of people at a very young age. So if you were to speak to my daughter, what would you say for someone that is showing signs of a great leadership in the future, very creative? What would you say to her starting out in, let's say, business? What are some things that you would say for her to be mindful of?
hmm I would probably say something like, well, I would tell her about my sister-in-law, who was part of the family business as well, and who was an actress. She went to college to be an actress, and she was very creative. And she and I thought very differently. I'm the logical part of it, and she was the creative. And it was a great partnership. But I would probably tell your daughter that she's going to think different from other people. I mean, we all think differently. And that's what makes, such good decisions. It's what makes the best solutions. And she should feel comfortable about speaking up, even if it sounds different from what other people are saying in business. And I would just say that creativity, in my mind, is such an important part of so many things. I don't think you can be a good researcher without being creative. You can't be a good teacher. You can't really be a good business person without some creativity or surrounding yourself with creative people. So she has a gift that not everyone has, and she should be proud of it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you so much for your time today. I very much appreciate your time. I feel like we dove into a lot of different stuff. I got a lot out of it, three in particular that I want to mention. I really appreciate what you mentioned in the beginning of this journey. You'd mentioned 8 months collecting data, collecting the surveys, focusing on the residents, businesses, and the restaurants. That is really important regarding collaboration. It's absolutely incredible, back to your point, for people to not focus on surrounding themselves with yes men, but to allow others to play devil's advocate so that we can build not only a more inclusive process, but to really make sure that people feel heard. So I appreciate you mentioning that. The second thing I appreciate you mentioned is the sheer strategy that came into play on you have this goal, you have this objective, but there's a lot of barriers. And in order to overcome those barriers, you not only thought, but you did outside the box, which was getting it on the ballot in the county, which basically in turn the city followed. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And then the third and final piece, I really appreciate you mentioning creativity. I think often in business, we talk so much about innovation and innovating for our customers and clients, and that is all good. It's very rare that we talk about internal creativity. So I very much appreciate you mentioning that. So all in all, thank you so much, Linda, for your time. If people want to get to know more about what you do with a lot of different business leaders, where's the best place that they can go to get that information?
Well, I have a website for my consulting business, and it's lindagoldsteinconsulting.com. And I also have a strong presence on LinkedIn. So you could look me up on LinkedIn. It's Linda Goldstein, St. Louis, Missouri.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Awesome. I will include both those in the show notes so people can just click and go right to your website, what you do on LinkedIn. But yet again, thank you so much for your time today. I very much appreciate it.
I really enjoyed this, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.